رحم الله من قرأ سورة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين سيدنا الممجد بشير المصدق المصطفى الأمجد محمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد. وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على الظالمين من الأولين والآخرين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد وقوله الحق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. Awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected teachers, elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Our series from tonight, inshallah, until Muharram comes, is for us to look at the commentary of one of the greatest traditions within the Muslim school of thought, and that is Hadith al-Kisa. From tonight, inshallah, on Thursday nights, up until Muharram, we will look at this monumental tradition within the Islamic faith and try to analyze it and try to expound upon its various intricacies, the secrets that it holds, and inshallah for us to be able to expound on such a great tradition within our Islamic thought. Hadith al-Kisa is a very famous tradition for us and has a huge position in terms of our theology, in terms of expounding upon our basic belief systems. For example, it provides us with the most important question, such as, why have we been created? It provides us with a deep understanding of the Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the Ahl al-Bayt, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhim ajma'een. It provides us with an understanding as to their role. It provides us with an understanding as to the grandiosity of these personalities. It also gives you and I an understanding of the way in which the family unit of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhimus salam was. And it also provides us with an understanding about our interaction with that family unit. It even provides us with an understanding of the malaika and the way in which chosen angels, such as Jibreel alayhi salam, interacts with those. And it also provides us an understanding with the role of revelation and the way ayat of Quran have been descended and the relationship between the Quran and the exponents, primary exponents of the Quran as the Ahl al-Bayt alayhimus salam. As such, one of the most important reasons that we will be looking at this particular tradition is underscored beautifully by a famous hadith from our sixth Imam, Jaffer as-Sadiq, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. Who states, hadithun tadrihi khayrun min alfi hadithun tarwihi, that one narration that you understand is greater than 1,000 narrations you may narrate. For you and I to take time out and to revisit such a great tradition that we recite so often when it comes to our gatherings, be it on a makhsus occasion, be it on occasion when there is a wedding within our families and our communities, for us to take time out and to revisit such an important tradition and try to remove the ritualization from its recitation. One, hadith that you understand is greater than 1,000 that you may narrate. I may memorize verse after verse, hadith after hadith, quote after quote. I could take a quote from any famous individual. I could take it from Mother Teresa. I could take it from Martin Luther King. But if I understand the reality of that quote, the depth, the value, how I may act upon that quote, it is greater than 1,000 that I will narrate without having understood it. And so it is important for you and I as a community to think about how we may arrest the increase in the ritualization of the actions that we are doing. What do we mean by ritualization? And most importantly, how does ritualization impact us as a community? Once we understand this, we're in a position to be able to arrest the increase of that act of ritualization. Ritualization is the act of doing something. However, the act itself is one that is a very superficial version of the act. Any act can become ritualized when I practice it without having concentration or awareness or background of that which I am practicing. The act becomes so repetitive, it eventually becomes very redundant. Why? Because the value of that matter is no longer there. When that happens, the impact is taken away. The genuine benefit, the blossom that comes from that act is taken away. This is ritualization. I can ritualize anything. I can ritualize my salah so that when I come every day on the prayer mat, it's done as quickly as possible. It is to discharge my duty as quickly as possible. 4 rak'ah are finished, and then I run back to the TV, or I run back to the thing that I am doing. This becomes a ritualization of the act of salah. Ritualization may be in the recitation of Quran. Ritualization can be in any way, shape, or form. What happens is that when we become very comfortable in what we're doing, when we become people of habit, then this becomes a ritualized act. And so it may be that we have been reciting Hadith al-Kisa for 20 years, for 50 years, but the outcome of it is that it hasn't changed me as an individual. I have ritualized the recitation of Hadith al-Kisa. If we see the impact of ritualization in our communities, we would realize how devastating ritualization has become to our community. How much it has curtailed the intellectual and spiritual growth of our communities by virtue of the ritualization of certain acts. Let me give you an example. Night of Laylatul Qadr. On the night of Qadr, the night of Qadr is so important to you and I because it is the night of destiny. It is the night of grandeur and power. On this night, 1 year of our coming destiny will be decided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What may decide those factors? My forthcoming year's health, wealth, what's going to happen with my business, what's going to happen with my community, what's going to happen with the world. What will decide those factors for me personally? And often we realize that the quality of the action that I'm going to perform, the commitment to the night, and how open I am with my Lord will determine the beauty of that night. And so, how I act on that night will ultimately determine what happens to me in the coming year. The next 12 months will be impacted by virtue of the quality of the amal that I perform on this particular night of Qadr. And so what do? We have a wonderful list of a'mal that we're going to perform. Remember that list? It was only a couple of weeks ago, yes? I hope we haven't forgotten it already. The PowerPoint comes, and there's a list of a'mal that we're going to do, isn't there? So for example, on the 19th and on the 21st of Shahr Ramadan, when Qadr comes, when our destiny for the next 12 months is going to be written for you and I, what are those a'mal that we perform? So for example, we start the a'mal with 2 rak'ah salah, correct? And we will recite Surah Al-Ikhlas a number of times in each rak'ah. After that, there'll be the tasbihat, correct? We will recite istighfar, and then we'll recite the la'an upon the killers of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. After that, we will now come to small ad'iyah, small da'as. And then eventually we will come to the dua where we place the Quran upon our heads, and we will begin one of the most beautiful of ad'iyah, where we are now invoking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by the names of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, and so we are mixing the thaqalain, the value of the Quran and the value of the holy Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. We say, Bika ya Allahu bi Muhammadin, bi Aliyin, bi Fatimatin, all the way to bil Hujjah. Now when you think about this, what we're doing here is a very beautiful a'mal on the night of Qadr. But you will notice that ritualization creeps into this particular a'mal. Ritualization, that we rush through this, we practice it as quickly as possible without thinking through that a'mal, without seeing the value of what we're trying to achieve through that a'mal. You will say, how do we do this? What do you mean that we as a community ritualize, even on the night of grandeur, when the blank check is being placed in front of me? On the 19th and on the 21st of Shahr Ramadan, when the Quran itself is revealed, in our a'mals we do not even have recitation of the Holy Quran. Have you noticed that? 23rd night comes, we recite 3 chapters of the Quran, correct? We'll recite Surah Ankabut, Surah Rum, and Surah Dukhan. Now we do this because it's Qadr, and there is a value between the night of Qadr and these 3 particular chapters of the Quran. But the 19th and 21st is no less Qadr, is it? It's still Qadr for you and I, otherwise we wouldn't have the a'mals in the first place. But on the 19th and 21st, we as a community have become so ritualistic that even on the night of Qadr, we do not have Quran recited in our a'mal. Can you see that? It's very interesting, isn't it? That that's where we've arrived at. If it had not been in the PowerPoint presentation to recite these 3 chapters, by God, we would not recite those 3 chapters on the night of the 23rd. Why? Because it's not in the PowerPoint, so we don't do it. If someone else was to have written it into the PowerPoint, we would do it. But because it's not in the PowerPoint, we won't do it. Think about how many people, thousands of people around the world, come on the nights of Qadr and don't even recite Quran because it's not in the PowerPoint. Maghrib will come, Fajr will come, but not a verse of Quran would have been recited. Why? This is the ritualization that occurs within our communities. The outcome of ritualization is devastating to a community. And the only way for us to be able to uproot ritualization from the community is to be objective about its presence within the community. To be objective. And the only way one is objective is to look outside our own selves and to see, if I was to see these same challenges within another community, how would I observe them? Would I be critical of them, or would I not be critical of them? Let me give you an example. Imagine now if you and I, we went to the church. There's a church up the road here, correct? We go to the church and we decide to sit at the back and just watch and observe what is taking place in this house of God, this house of worship. And for example, there was a community and all of their program was in Latin, but none of the congregation understood Latin. or all of the program was in French and none of the community understood French, having seen them conclude their ritual and sing and praise God and all of those things, you would probably come up to the pastor or the priest and say, what did your community take away from what just transpired? You spent 2 hours and you were praising God and you were singing and you were doing whatever else and reciting your prayers. But having finished these 2 hours, tangibly speaking, how has your community moved forward out of what you have just done? And the pastor or the priest would have to admit and say, well, they didn't understand anything. Yes, they came, but they didn't take anything away from it. And you would say, well, why then did they come? What was the benefit from being there from 10 a.m. till 12 p.m. on the Sunday when they haven't benefited anything, be it from your sermon or reciting the Psalms in Latin or in French or whatever it might have been? Here we would see ritualization as a problem. We would say, how can that be? I can't allow the community to be in such a ritualistic way. If you were objective towards another community, we would also ask ourselves, what ritualization has crept into our own community? How do we then arrest that decline in the community? How then do we analyze? How then do we spot? How then do we overcome the ritualization within our own communities instead of allowing it to continue? And once ritualization has crept in, the outcome is less and less people find benefit in coming, because they themselves will realize that there is no growth within themselves, no growth within the community. It is a ritual that we are doing, but the community has not benefited from it. And what happens is, we as a community stay away from the program, stay away from the community by virtue of the ritualization of those actions. Let me give you an example. Bear with me on this. Turn around, everyone. Just turn around behind you or turn around next to you. How many under 12s are here tonight? How many 12 to 18-year-olds are here tonight? How many 18 to 30-year-olds are there here tonight? No, I'm sorry, uncle, you are not 18 to 30. Handsome you may be. The gray is giving it away. You see, if you look at the average audience here, the age, yes, it would probably be above 30. It may even be above 40. The average audience. I don't know what's happening on the sisters, but in front of me, there are very few youths here. What time of year is it? It's the summer holidays. Meaning, there's no school tomorrow, yet, where are the under 12s? There's no school tomorrow. Where are the under 18s? There's no university. Where are the under 25s? Why is it now, when you look around and you are honest with yourself, that we do not have more than 10 youth here tonight, when there's no school and no university tomorrow? And the answer has to be because the program isn't appealing to that demographic. It's not appealing to that part of our community. And one has to then go further. Why is it not appealing to our community? What is it that keeps a community, people that are religious? They will pray, they will be interested, they will debate, they will be knowledgeable, they will repost, they will partake in Twitter, in discussions in regards to religiosity. But on a Thursday night, they will no longer come to the masjid. What is it? And one has to admit, part and parcel is the ritualization of what we're doing within the community. It must have this, it must do this, it must do this, then we must cry, then we must have our chai, and we must go home. And so, because we continue with this cycle, what happens is, it becomes a very ritualistic movement within the community. It has not evolved to face the challenges of the time. It has not evolved to deal with the needs of those people who are not attending. And ultimately, in 5 years' time, if on Thursday nights we continue to see a decline in the numbers and not youths attending, when they become married and parents, because they did not see value in Thursday night, because they did not see value in what we were doing, they will not instill that in their children. And what will happen? Our community will become a very small community, except on Qadr and except on Ashura. And so we must be able to tackle this ritualization. We must find ways of evolving the community to meet with the needs of the time. One of the ways that we can do this is that when we practice our rituals, we have a greater depth of knowledge of those. And so our series for the next 2.5 months, inshallah, until Muharram, will be to look at Hadith al-Kisa and to analyze Hadith al-Kisa so that when we recite it, we have a greater degree of knowledge of what we're reciting and a greater degree of aspiration to impact Hadith al-Kisa into our lives and to help us in the evolution of our spirituality. One of the things that we've just done now is hand out some notepads. And a few, maybe 10, have been handed out tonight. And inshallah, next week we will hand out a lot more on the brothers and on the sisters' side. And the purpose of that particularly is to also help with the issues of ritualization. When it comes to the majlis, we have also ritualized the majlis program. What do we mean? If I said to you, and most people in this audience have children, if I said to you that your teacher was to call up tomorrow, the teacher of your children was to call up tomorrow from school and say, Mr. So-and-so, your son, your daughter came to school today and didn't bring a pen or pad to school, what would you say to that teacher? What would you say to your child if your child came home and didn't bother to bring a pen and pad to the school? Be honest with me. What would you say to them? I imagine you would probably say something along the lines of, well, why did you bother going to school? How did you expect to learn? How did you expect to take notes? How did you expect to retain what you were going to learn in your classes at school? Why did you bother going? Correct or not? But if I was to say, let us bring a pen and pad to the majlis to be able to write down what we've learned so that we retain it, this would be something that is very difficult for us to be able to implement. But again, objectively speaking, if I was to see my son or daughter do it at school, I would lambast them for not bringing their pen and pad. I would say, what benefit were you trying to take from your school time? Where were you going to make notes? How were you going to retain the information? In the same way, if we are going to break the ritualization of the majlis and to be able to evolve the majlis so that what is said, what is discussed, what is debated is noted and retained, then it has to be that we start from now evolving the process of what we're doing. Hence, you will see notepads and pens have been distributed. And inshallah, next week we will distribute even more when we actually discuss Hadith al-Kisa into a little bit more detail. The hadith from our sixth Imam, Jaffer al-Sadiq, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi, says, write, for if you do not write, you will not remember. Write, for if you do not write, you will not remember. This isn't from me, this isn't my advice. This is the command of the Imam alayhi salam. And an Imam who was the Imam, a teacher of 4,000 students. Someone who knew best how to get the best out of his students. And so if we're going to break that ritualization of coming and listening to 40, 50, 60 years of majlis, but then not remembering what was said the moment I leave the door. One of the things we need to institute within our community is that practice of writing what is being said during the majlis, so that I may note that down and keep it with me until another time where I can open it and say, yes, that is something that was discussed. Our methodology, when we come next week inshallah and actually start the commentary of Hadith al-Kisa, we will be taking 2 books, and I brought them with me just to demonstrate what we will be doing. The first one is called Min Fiqh al-Zahra, and this is volume 1, Hadith al-Kisa al-Mujallad al-Awwal, Hadith al-Kisa, the commentary. This is volume 1 of this 3-part series called Min Fiqh al-Zahra, looking at the thoughts, looking at the beautiful corpus of traditions that comes from Her Eminence Lady Fatima al-Zahra salawatullah wa salamuhu alayha. This entire volume is dedicated as the commentary of Hadith al-Kisa, and it is written by Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Hussein Shirazi rahmatullahi alayh. The next book we will also be using in our commentary of Hadith al-Kisa will be Fi Rihabi Hadith al-Kisa by the Khatib Sheikh Ali Hyderi al-Muayyid, another great scholar and someone who has the entire book is dedicated to the commentary of Hadith al-Kisa. We will take these 2 books inshallah, and we will be looking at what these 2 scholars have said about this great tradition in our Islamic culture. What exactly will we be looking at, and what is the methodology of our commentary? In particular, it is of course our belief that the Sunnah of Rasulullah and Ahlul Bayt salamullahi alayhim ajma'een is divided into 3. There is qawlun wa fi'lun wa takreerun. It is their words, it is their actions, and their tacit approvals that make up the Sunnah of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. That which they do comprises the Sunnah. And that which reaches us, as long as we consider it to be true and categorically correct, then we consider that to be the Sunnah, and we consider that to have made up the tools for us to be able to analyze and derive the wisdom of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. In Hadith al-Kisa, the fact that this narration comes to us by the purified tongue of Fatima al-Zahra salawatullah wa salamuhu alayha, we will be looking at the minute detail of what she alayhi salam says. Because when she says something, it's not flippant. When she says something, it is not said in a way other than purity and perfection. And so when she decides to use a letter or a word or a comment in order to describe this event, it is done so in absolute perfection. And so when she calls Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam Sahib al-Hawd, or when she says, for example, and narrates that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is Shafi'a ummati, that Rasulullah said that he is the great intercessor of his ummah, instead of just reading it ritually, we want to understand every statement that was made within this great hadith and the impact of that upon you and I. Why she chose these words, and what does it indicate when she chose these words. When you come to this, you will see even the first line, An Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, An Fatima al-Zahra, just this first line has several pages of commentary attributed to it to tell us what it's indicating and what Fatima alayhi salam wanted us to take away just by that opening line in Hadith al-Kisa. One line, several pages of writing dedicated to one line. And all it is Jabir narrates from Fatima. And that one line is enough to have several pages. And here, inshallah, from next week, we'll begin to discuss exactly what the commentary of Hadith al-Kisa is. Hadith al-Kisa is given to us by Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari. Jabir, one of the great companions, and amongst the great things that he has gifted to us is that he was the first individual to go on ziyarah of the ziyarat of Arba'iniyya. 40 days after the martyrdom of Aba Abdullah al-Husayn salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. It is said that as he arrives at the plains of Karbala, he begins to lament, having known what has taken place, having heard what takes place. He asks his aide to come and take him to the grave of Aba Abdullah, and as he arrives at that grave, it is said that he begins to fling himself onto the grave of Husayn ibn Ali. As he does so, he addresses and he says, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. And then he says, O Husayn, will you not respond to a lover of yours? But how will you respond when your head has been severed from your shoulders? When the blood has given you your ghusl? When it was the sands of Karbala that gave you your kafan? O Husayn, how will you respond? But how can you respond in such a way? O Husayn, we bear testimony that we were with you on the 10th of Muharram. His keeper and assistant asks him, O Jabir, we were not with Husayn on the 10th of Muharram. We were not on the plains of Karbala. We were not there on Ashura. How is it that you can say that we were with him on the 10th of Muharram? Jabir responds by saying, I swear by Allah, I heard from the messenger of Allah that he who is pleased with an action is like the one who partakes in that action, and he who is displeased with an action separates himself from that action. I was pleased with the efforts of those who were assisting Husayn ibn Ali. I long to be with those who defended Husayn ibn Ali, and so I am counted amongst those who are with Husayn ibn Ali. Ala la'natullahi ala al-qawmi al-zalimin. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Please let us conclude this discussion with a loud salawat in honor of Fatima al-Zahra salawatullah wa salamuhu alayha.